Ever feel like your brain is kind of pulled in a million directions at once, like you're
Mm.
fighting a losing battle with every notification and alert?
Oh, absolutely. It's the reality of the digital age, isn't it?
Yeah. And today's deep dive is going to explore that feeling and compare it to the very real battles of the past. Like how do the challenges of being a man way back when stack up against the stuff we deal with today?
Yeah, it's a fascinating comparison. We're diving into this excerpt from 23.txt, and it really makes you think about what it meant to be a man when being a warrior wasn't, a metaphor,
Right.
but a way of life.
It's intense. The excerpt throws all these historical examples at you, like men facing wars and revolutions, making life or death decisions. You can practically hear the swords clashing.
It's vivid.
Makes you wonder if there's something missing in our world of, endless notifications and choices and
Well, it's easy to romanticize the past, but the source makes a really good point. In those life or death situations, hesitation, that could be fatal. So it's not hard to imagine how that constant pressure, that need to act now, would really shape a man's character.
totally.
Right.
Like sacrifice for the greater good. That wasn't just an idea back then. It was essential for survival.
Right.
So how does that idea translate to today?
Right.
Because the excerpt, it kind of shifts gears and throws us right into our reality. Screens, notifications,
Mhm.
that constant pull of the digital world.
And that is where it gets really interesting. See, the source argues that the very tools that are supposed to make our lives easier might actually be weakening us.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, think about it. What if the new battlefield isn't some distant land, but our attention span?
Okay, now that you mention it, I have definitely lost an hour or two, maybe three, to my phone, just scrolling. Is that the modern equivalent of losing a battle?
It's a powerful analogy, and it really gets to the core argument of this whole excerpt, which is that this constant distraction, it's eating away at our willpower, that same willpower that, those historical figures relied on to face down armies and lead revolutions.
And it's not just about like losing time to our phones, right?
Mm.
This excerpt from tum3.txt, it makes this point about willpower, that same grit that those historical figures relied on.
Right, right.
It's almost like it's being chipped away slowly but surely by all the digital noise around us.
Yeah, it's a really interesting way to think about it. The source, it describes willpower almost like a muscle. Like back then, it was exercised every single day just by necessity. But these days, well, it's easy to see how our willpower, it might be getting kind of flabby. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And that has implications for, well, everything really, not just how much time we spend scrolling.
totally. And they use this phrase in the excerpt that really stuck with me. It talks about how our modern world, all the distractions, they've dulled the edges of perseverance.
Mm. Yeah, I like that.
That's kind of unsettling, right? Like, are we just less patient now?
Hmm.
Or have we actually become less capable of sticking with things even when they really matter to us?
It makes you wonder, right? Think about it. Your own life, your goals, the things you're working towards, big or small. Is that pull towards instant gratification, that need for the next dopamine hit, is it actually making it harder to stay focused, to stay the course? It's a question we're thinking about.
So it sounds kind of bleak, right? Like we're all just doomed to lose this willpower battle.
Right.
But thankfully, 23.txt doesn't just leave us hanging. It actually gives us like a roadmap
Yeah.
for reclaiming our willpower, our focus, our kind of inner warrior.
I love that. I love that the source, it doesn't just, complain about the problems. Like, okay, here's what you can do about it. It reminds us that we're not just stuck in this digital age, at the whim of our technology. We have a choice.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get into it. The first step, it really jumped out at me. Embrace discipline.
Right.
And it's not just this, vague idea. The source, it actually gives real examples of what that means in our lives.
Yeah, and that's important because it's easy to say, just be more disciplined, but what does that actually look like?
Yeah.
So the source, it kind of pushes us to set those clear goals, to stick to them even when, our phone's blowing up, to be intentional about the choices we make.
And that leads perfectly into the next step.
Yeah.
Limiting those digital distractions.
Yeah.
Again, it's not just, oh, put your phone down.
Yeah.
Like the source gets surprisingly specific about like tactics that you can actually use.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's important because it acknowledges that there's not going to be like a one-size-fits-all solution. What works for one person might not work for someone else. So maybe it's setting some screen time limits or turning off those notifications or, maybe it's designating a specific time of day to even look at social media.
It's about like taking back control.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
next step is really interesting, especially considering, the world we live in today. And it's about cultivating patience,
Right.
which seems like almost countercultural, right?
Totally. Because it's all about instant gratification these days, we want it now. But
Yeah.
the source, it reminds us that some things, they just take time.
And that's okay.
Right. And the ability to embrace that process, to persevere, that's where the good stuff happens.
It's like that saying, like, enjoy the journey, not just the destination. Which I guess kind of ties into the next step that 23.txt talks about.
Mm.
It's about making decisive choices.
Right. Like no more overthinking, no more getting stuck in our heads.
Yeah, just act.
Exactly. And thinking back to those historical examples that we were talking about earlier, when the stakes were high, action, it was often the only way forward. And obviously we don't want to be reckless here, but there's power in trusting your gut and making a decision and just taking that step.
Totally. And then finally, the source leaves us with this really great point. Reconnect with your purpose.
Oh, I love that one.
And it feels, I don't know, just more personal, I guess. It's not really about winning these external battles. It's more about, like, what's important to you? What are you working towards?
Exactly. It's about connecting with something bigger than ourselves, because having that sense of purpose, it can be incredibly powerful. It can be the thing that keeps us going even when things get tough.
Totally. And that really is what this whole deep dive, this whole conversation boils down to. 23.txt. It reminds us that the world has changed, the battles are different, but that warrior spirit, that resilience, that's still within us.
It is. It's a choice.
We just have to choose to tap into it. So as we wrap up, I think that's a powerful question to leave you with. In this modern world, in this digital age, what does it mean for you to be a warrior?